GM friends, welcome back to another episode on the Friends Validator Show. If this is your first video, I'm yours, Juri Maibaum, and this show is a hub that brings together crypto pioneers, exciting projects, and a thriving community. We at Friends Validator are a core contributor to the staking sector and believe that it will grow into a multi-billion-dollar industry over the next couple of years. On the show, you will learn how to profit from the proof of stake run-up, how to make passive income in crypto with staking, and how to stay ahead of the curve. So if this sounds interesting to you and you want to profit from the staking revolution, subscribe to this show. And today I welcome Mara and Danny from DeFi Dojo to the show to talk about the highly anticipated launch of Berachain. We will talk about the Berachain ecosystem, discuss if Berachain is much more than just a funny meme, and cover the proof of liquidity concept, the Bera airdrop, and much more. And with that being said, Mara, Danny, welcome to the show once again.
Hey man, good morning. Thanks for having us.
Hey Yuri, good morning, man.
Yeah, good morning to the US, and super excited about this episode. This episode really aims to give people a super comprehensive overview of what is happening in the Berachain ecosystem, the launch, and so on and so forth. I saw a lot of podcasts on YouTube and on Spotify already, but they have been very technical, and we want to really take people here by the hands and give them like a full overview that is like completely friendly for people who start completely from scratch. So let's do that. So from a technical point of view, Berachain is very straightforward. It's a proof of stake chain, or it's going to be a proof of stake chain, to put it more precise, and it will leverage the Cosmos-SDK like many other app chains or general purpose layer ones in the ecosystem, and we can expect to see like a thriving DeFi ecosystem on top of Berachain. Funny enough, and we will talk about this in a second, even though they had the opportunity to easily enable IBC, the team decided against that. So this is also something we need to talk about. But unlike all of the other chains that are out there about to launch, I think Berachain gets most of the hype. So yeah, let's talk about this. Danny, Mara, where do you think does this hype come from? I remember when we were in Denver and everyone was crazy about the Berapalooza event. So yeah, what's going on there? Because from a high level, it's a POS chain where you can launch DeFi applications on top of it.
I mean, I think that Berachain has done an amazing job at really just kind of developing their community and like the narrative around it. And, you know, we'll get more into like what proof of liquidity means, but I do think that it is very exciting to see chains really kind of creating new things. There's a lot of forks, whether that be a layer one chain, whether that be a DeFi protocol. There's a lot of things that copy one another in crypto. And I think, you know, Berachain is taking a brave stand at trying something new. And I think it's really exciting. And I think, you know, this kind of new approach to DeFi and to a layer one blockchain combined with great memes and good vibes is kind of the reason why Berachain has, you know, been able to go from a very cool and kind of joking around community and NFT project to being, I think, one of the most promising projects launching this year and maybe, you know, in the next few years. So I'm very excited about it. But what do you think, Danny?
Yeah, I agree. I think the hype kind of started like naturally, just like community building. Everybody on Twitter was sort of excited. But then I think everybody got like really serious when they were their testnet was the third fastest application to reach 1 million users. And so Facebook Threads was slightly faster, and then Chat GPT was faster. And so like it's of all technology products, their testnet was the third fastest application in history to reach 1 million people. And so I think like anyone who was in the crypto space who was sort of thinking like, oh, that's kind of silly, that's just bears smoking bongs, it's just going to be an NFT project or something, had to like pivot quickly and take a more serious look because of all the like users that they were able to get so early. And so it really is going to be one of the most exciting launches this year. So I think the hype is real. You know, the hype kind of became real for a lot of people in that moment. And I think it made people pay attention even more closely than they were.
You know, it's funny that there's been this meme of like, you know, Berachain isn't real, and they really played into that. And I think they've kind of had some very funny kind of like counter memes type of thing, which have been great. And it is amazing to see how quickly like they have grown users into, you know, the testnet. I think because of that, like the testnet one had a bit of issues just because like they had such massive amount of attention and users. And so scalability was an issue. And like, that's a pretty kind of, you know, normal thing when you're testing stuff out. It seems like with this testnet 2 that they recently launched, things are very different. You know, it's the testnet's moving much quicker. I think we're also getting closer to launch. We can talk about when we think that's going to happen, but I think we're getting closer to it now. You know, and things are really kind of heating up. So for those of you guys who have not taken a look at Bera, at least like an in-depth look, I think really now is the time to kind of start familiarizing yourself with the architecture of the blockchain, with the protocols that are building on top of it, and trying to get some exposure to what I think could be one of the biggest airdrops of the year.
Yeah, we will definitely talk about the airdrop in a second as well. But let's talk about proof of liquidity, because this is where I think the secret sauce is, kind of. Because this is like really one of the things that you mentioned in regards to a project trying out something completely new, and proof of liquidity is a novel concept in order to improve things that don't work in crypto right now. To give you like a very broad overview, we also recorded a video about that, so please feel free to check that out, where we explain proof of liquidity in just 2 minutes. And in my view, that's like everything you need to know in order to get a high level understanding. So Berachain solves a lot of problems in the proof of stake system, generally by introducing a dual token system, the Bera token and the BGT token. Because what you have in many ecosystems, let's take just Injective as an example. If you stake Injective, your Injective ING is staked, so you can't do much with it. Obviously, you can liquid stake it, but that's like really, the end of the puzzle here. So you can't do much with it. Berachain says, okay, we have 2 tokens. One is the Bera token, one is the BGT token. Bera is used for gas fees and network security, so you stake Bera in order to secure the chain. And BGT is used for governance and on-chain incentivization. So when you, as a delegator, want to stake Bera in order to secure the chain, you do so with a fellow validator. A validator like our upcoming one, DeFi Dojo X Friends Validator. And this validator also stakes Bera and therefore activates the validator. So it's like a very, so nothing new here as of now. But then the emissions that take place because of staking Bera is BGT, which is the governance and on-chain incentivization token that I've just mentioned. And BGT is then also used to provide liquidity to various protocols within the Berachain ecosystem, like AMMs, lending pools, and so on and so forth. And users who provide liquidity to these protocols then also earn BGT as a reward. So this is where the incentivization part comes into play. And then these users can delegate these BGT to the activated validator again. And the more BGT a validator receives, the higher their BGT emissions will be. So they basically move around the concept that Bera is locked, and the only active token within this ecosystem is BGT. So 2 questions here. One, is this the correct way to frame it, Mara? So how would you respond to this description? And also, a question that we have got from our community was like, nice concept, but dual token systems haven't worked so far. So how would you respond to these 2 things?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's super interesting. I do think, you know, the part about it that I like the most is, you know, the DeFi Dojo is a super active kind of like DeFi think tank. And, you know, I think it's really kind of putting the power back into the hands and like the users of the actual product. And it's passing that on to the validator, right? And we also, all of us here, you know, work on this amazing kind of like really high level validator, you know, as well with the Friends and DeFi Dojo collaboration. So I think, you know, it is just super exciting to see them kind of like recognize how important those two groups are, like DeFi protocols, DeFi users, capital allocators, and validators, putting all those people, kind of at the core and the center of what's going on. And really kind of like recognizing, that liquidity providers, are a really important piece. I think we have seen, a lot of challenges with other proof of stake systems where, you kind of have a binary, right? I want to earn yield. Well, what do? I can go and I can, participate in consensus and in governments and stake my tokens. That's like one option that I can do on the validator side, or I can participate in DeFi, right? But those DeFi users are often, times shut out of things like governance, things like, making decisions on where emissions will go, on participating in the consensus of the protocol, right? And like directing emissions. In some ways, like liquid staking tokens and liquid restaking tokens, have helped that, but it hasn't been perfect, right? And I'm just very excited to kind of see how this new iteration works. In terms of like 2 token systems, I think this is actually technically a 3 token system, right? So you've got the Bera token, you've got, this like soul-bound token, BGT, and then you've got Honey, which is like the stable coin. I think that they've thought really, at a high level about the dynamics between those 3, how they're going to work. I think if both, BGT and Bera were tradable, I think that we would have a lot of those same issues that we've seen previously with 2 token systems, where the dynamics and the kind of like, the flywheels can get out of whack. But I think the way that they have planned it out, where people can use their BGT to vote and kind of direct these emissions, delegate to validators, I think makes a lot of sense. And then there's basically this one-way door where if you want to get the gas token, if you want to get the Bera token, you can burn that BGT into Bera. I think it makes a lot of sense. And I think that, I'm really optimistic on these kind of like token systems having long-term alignment. I think that like we've seen a lot of kind of new chains spin up, not a lot of use cases for tokens, not quite as much thought put into tokenomics. And like maybe they have a very kind of like quick period of excitement and high APRs and all this kind of stuff. And then it kind of fizzles out and it's gone. I'm very optimistic that Berachain, with this architecture, with this tokenomic system, will have a lot more longevity, because they really are aligning the validator set, liquidity providers, and protocols all together to kind of have this longer term alignment, have this kind of like long-term belief and faith in the system, and not just kind of be this like Ponzonomics thing that has a blow off top and is over. So that's why I'm excited about it. But I'm interested to hear what you guys think as well. Farmer, what's your take on the dual or the tri token system? Do you think that it'll lead to problems, or you think it's kind of a new, interesting, novel thing?
I'm not sure. I'm not like you and Steven, where I'm very good, I think, about like geniusly like designing DeFi protocols and flywheels to where that they will be perfect. Like what I'm excited about is that like someone's trying something new, like someone's like, hey, we have this awesome brand, we have this cool idea, and we've been able to watch it play out for 2 years, watch the team like build at a really high level and really like execute on everything that they wanted to achieve. So like, it's also interesting, like the time when it comes out, like say if it comes out in the fall and we do have like really bullish conditions, we may only get to see it work well for 18 months and then not even be stress tested until we get back into some bearish conditions in the future. So obviously I'm excited about, because I think Berachain has so much like tailwinds, and like almost anything they try is going to like find some success. But, how many more L2s do we need? How many more modular layers and DA layers do we need before it seems like we have like a lot of empty block space in the crypto space right now. And so like anyone trying something new and mixing it up, that's what I'm excited about, because it could lead to better infrastructure overall for all of crypto in the future.
One thing which I think, I know you're a big fan of, Danny, is these periods of like higher inflation, and I think Berachain is going to have that. From what I understand, they're going to have like a halvening period. So like the first year there will be high inflation of the token. There's going to be a lot of kind of rewards going out there, to incentivize new users to come and check out the ecosystem, come and check out new protocols. And you know, like a lot of DeFi ecosystems have incentive programs, but this one is going to be different, right? You know, like basically, you know, we're seeing on Optimism, there's like the Optimism Festival going on. There's the Arbitrum long-term incentive program, whatever that thing's called. You know, but that goes through this kind of like centralized system of governance. It's very time consuming. It's very expensive for these processes to go through. There's a lot of actors and hands involved. I think that having a kind of true, trustless, immediate system for how these incentives are going to be going out to protocols and then on to users themselves is really new and refreshing. We're going to have that right out of the gate. We're going to have this high inflation, you know, from day one. And then it's going to kind of like, you know, inflation will decrease over time. I heard some kind of estimates that it won't be until, you know, year 3 even or something like that, where the staking APR for Berachain will be, you know, in single digits. So I think we're going to have like a period where Berachain could easily be the go-to place for DeFi, you know, for this foreseeable future, at least the first year and maybe the first 2 or 3, something like that. So that's why I'm excited about it. You know, it's kind of like flipping the normal narrative on its head. Normally we talk about in DeFi like a player versus player environment. That's kind of what we're in right now with this, like, you know, things are tough out there in the yieldscape. Tokens are down bad. You know, there's a lot of kind of like protocols farming the farmers. And I think Berachain inherently, with this like proof of liquidity system and the way they have everything structured, is going to be a player versus environment where we are out there participating. And the way, you know, the more that you can provide liquidity, the more that you can participate in governance, the more you're kind of getting involved with protocols, the more you will benefit out of it. And I really appreciate that, rather than like, you know, farmers going out there and feeling like they're getting wrecked in one way or the other, which has been a common theme for the last couple of weeks.
But just to maybe like touch base on this, I mean, I like how you frame it. Basically, the more you provide liquidity, the more it entitles you to participate in governance. I think that's a very romantic way to put it, but we had very bad experiences with tokens that had a high inflation. Specifically towards the end of the previous cycle. So we all have PSD from FMOS, for example. But my honest question here is like, what's like the real value behind that potential ecosystem? Because if it's like really this player versus player thing, then at some point, if nobody wants to play this game anymore, then we might end up with an ecosystem once again that just does inflation on a high level, and people are tired of it. So I don't want to be like the party boomer here, but just to make sure that we are on the same page here, like what the specific lessons learned are from previous projects that operated in this high DeFi yield ecosystem and had a relatively high inflation in the beginning.
Yeah, I don't think the Evmos comparison is fair. Like, I was out there in the trenches of Evmos, you know, as well. I similarly feel like, you know, a little bit of that PTSD. When it was good, it was really good, and when it was bad, it was really, really bad. So
I think it took 4 weeks until it was very bad. It was precisely 4 weeks.
And like, you know, I think the technology that Federico and the team over at Evmos created is fantastic, and it has spurred on a lot of really amazing stuff like Canto, inspiring quite likely Berachain, and other things that have come later. I think they spent a lot of time on the tech and could have spent more time on the tokenomics. And I think like they launched in bullish conditions and the token did quite well for a while. And then there was some kind of unfortunate things that happened. First of all, the DeFi ecosystem was not very good. I don't even remember the names of the dApps, but they were all pretty mid to bad, in my opinion. Like, there was not a lot of things to do. There was not a lot of ways to, you know, do stuff with your funds on Evmos. Bridging was also an issue, right? It was the first EVM kind of Cosmos-based chain. It was very confusing. How do I move from Osmosis to Evmos? You know, the user experience was not great. You had to, you know, use different wallets. There was weird wait times. The bridges wasn't intuitive. There was issues like that. Then they got slammed by the Nomad exploit, right? Like, there was the biggest bridge that was on the ecosystem. you know, got exploited for, I think, 100% of the funds that it was holding. And that was super devastating as well. So it kind of was a combination of, I think, not enough gamification, not enough interesting dApps, and then a bridge exploit that really kind of unfortunately killed Evmos. I think Berachain's gonna be very different. I think that, you know, if you start going and kind of looking at the amount of growth that is going on, the amount of dApps that are going to be launching on Berachain and who have already announced, even before the like chain is live, it's wild. I think there's at least 50 projects that I've seen that are building, and that's like, you know, a super kind of like mature to out of the gate DeFi ecosystem, which I'm really excited about. There's going to be games, there's going to be NFTs, there's a lot of infrastructure native or coming over that's building on Berachain. And I think a big one also is, you know, going to be on the bridge side of things, right? So there's a lot of kind of native bridge partners who are starting day one on Berachain. A big one is going to be Union. So Union is also not live yet, but I'm super excited about the project. It's basically a project that is exporting IBC into EVM and other ecosystems. So it's going to be using kind of like the same core Cosmos technology of IBC, putting a layer of additional security on top of it through zero knowledge proofs. And I believe that they will be the you know, bridging partner for Berachain when it comes to modular assets and to Cosmos assets. And then we'll see other bridges as well. I think Stargate's going to be over there. I think all of the kind of major bridges will be there, and we won't have that kind of same level of centralization risk. So to me, just to recap that you know, that little rant is, one, they're adding in this kind of like 3-token system and gamification, which I think is quite likely to lead to there not being that disinterest that you were talking about, Yuri. 2, they're coming out of the gate with a exciting DeFi ecosystem and, you know, an exciting amount of incentives that are going to be pushed into that DeFi ecosystem. And then 3, they're not relying on one bridge. And I would imagine, hopefully, this is kind of the unknown piece, they're going to have a much better user experience out of the box day one compared to things like, you know, Evmos or Kanto or other projects that were kind of bridging this gap between EVM and Cosmos have in the past.
Yeah, thanks for clarifying this. I think this is like very important, because that's like something like lots of people forget about when they get too greedy about the yield. Where does the yield come from? But I think in Berachain's case, that can make a lot of sense. You covered like the different dApps that will launch on Berachain. Can you like talk a little bit about that? Is like Berachain completely permissionless for that? So can everybody launch an application on Berachain, and what are like the applications that you're most excited about? So maybe we can start with you, Farmer.
Yeah. So my understanding is that it's not permissionless, that dApps go and find a validator, and they use the validator to send their emissions to people on Berachain. And so I think there's a little bit of confusion still about like how that will work exactly, but that's my understanding, is that like if an application wants to build on Berachain, they have to go and do the BD with validators themselves, and that validators will actually mint and admit those tokens to the rest of the ecosystem. Is that your understanding?
I think my understanding is a little different. I do think that it will be permissionless to launch. Like there is this very interesting dynamic that you're talking about, Danny, where how incentives are pushed out to protocols, right? Because there is going to be this inflation going on a per block basis. So like, let's say when the DeFi Dojo X Friends validator is live on Berachain, if we win a block, we will be able to direct incentives for that period of time, right? So there's a few different ways that can play out. One, there can be this kind of like direct relationship where we're, you know, talking to a DeFi protocol, we make some sort of agreement where they're going to give people that are delegating to the DeFi Dojo X Friends validator a certain amount of their tokens if we are emitting to them a certain amount of incentives that are coming through us, right? That's one way that it can work. Another way that it can work is there's going to be these kind of bribe marketplaces. So I think there's a few of them out there. I can't remember all the different names of them. I think Bermuda Finance is one that's going to be doing that. There's going to be, I think, a couple of them that are places where essentially, I think the other one is Infrared, which is also like LST protocol, where essentially, like, as a validator, we can kind of go and have some collective bargaining where we can not have to kind of like make a one-to-one agreement with a protocol, but rather at a larger layer kind of say, we are going to allocate X amount to this protocol, Z amount to that protocol, and kind of like go down the list and have a broader look. You know, the really exciting thing, I think, when Berachain goes live, you know, like, and when you're considering who you want to delegate to in terms of the Berachain validator set is, you know, the DeFi Dojo X Friends validator is going to be super well positioned. We're already talking to a ton of protocols. We're already out there, you know, like a lot of these protocols we're already familiar with. 1, 2, we're going out there and talking to a ton more. And that's kind of both at the like individual protocol level, but then also these like governance aggregators, like kind of bribe markets as well. And we also, I think, have like just a great perspective having participated in so many new ecosystems as they're getting launched, as well as kind of more, you know, mature ones like ETH mainnet and Arbitrum and Optimism and the other ones where, you know, these incentives can kind of have the most value. So I think that we will be able to hopefully, you know, identify kind of like the highest opportunities out there in terms of like, number one, what can users or delegators to the DeFi Dojo X Friends validator, like the biggest opportunity they can get in terms of rewards. And then 2, you know, what can be the biggest use for the ecosystem, right? So as an easy example, the DeFi Dojo is very focused on liquid staking protocols, on liquid restaking, on stable coins. That will probably be kind of a core focus of like what we're doing and where we're directing our emissions to, you know, through the proof of stake system. Of course, there's also other really important pairs as well, right? So like thinking about DEX liquidity, you know, what are the optimal amounts of liquidity for a certain DEX to have? You know, like thinking about the differences between there's going to be some solidly velodrome forks out there. Like how should those be prioritized compared to, you know, a traditional AMM compared to like things that are looking more similar to Uniswap, right? So I think that like I'm really excited to kind of be out there in the trenches, participating in that DeFi ecosystem day one. And then as a validator, you know, kind of helping to grow the DeFi ecosystem, helping to kind of prioritize emissions towards the most important protocols and the most kind of like, you know, interesting yields that are going to be out there. So it's going to really put the DeFi Dojo out there for the first time, you know, to be able to kind of have a hand in all these different pieces, a player kind of across the ecosystem more broadly. And so I think it's going to be super exciting to see how all of these things play out. But we're certainly expecting to be very active in this whole process.
Yeah, absolutely. I just saw Winnie put out a post with Stegcito, and I think another thing that's so exciting about Berachain is that there's like 100 dApps already, and so there's like 20 DeFi applications, there's 10, you know, NFT marketplaces, there's going to be like, I think like meme coin generators, all kinds of like meme coin stuff. Like I think there's going to be like a lot of stuff for people to do like right at launch, like right when things get going. And I think that's been like one of the like hardest things for projects like Say and other projects that have launched, where they launch their L1 and then it takes 1.5 years before there's any applications doing any real volume on chain. And so that's another like huge advantage I think Berachain comes from, like right from the beginning, is there's already, you know, 100 dApps, and, you know, maybe there'll be 500 by the time it launches.
Yeah, that would be like crazy to think about that. Like 100 or 500 dApps, I couldn't even come up with 100 Ethereum dApps from on top of my head. Like I would really need to go on DeFi Llama and check out all of them. So yeah, that's definitely very impressive. So one project I know quite well is Shogun, which will be launching. So yeah, let's see how this ecosystem will evolve and how many dApps we will see at the beginning of the Berachain ecosystem. In regards to the relationship, validators and protocols, it reminds me a little bit also of EigenLayer and the AVSs, not from a security point of view, but from the BD efforts that you do. Like it's How would you respond to that, to this analogy? Like, is this like something also where you think that the crypto industry will head towards generally that protocols, applications will need to talk more to validators about all sorts of different stuffs to ensure that the ecosystem generally is fairly incentivized and rewarded? Because like the old design was really, okay, you launch an application and the validator does the transactions, period. But now with EigenLayer and Berachain, we see like kind of a shift here, kind of. And in regards to Berachain, I think it's more about liquidity questions than restaking or security questions. So how would you respond to this analogy, Mara?
Yeah, I think it's an interesting one. I think, as you pointed out, they're very different in terms of like what the relationship is. But the fact that both systems are putting validators at the core of kind of like decision making and the discussion and the negotiation that's going on, I definitely think that analogy makes a ton of sense to me, right? So like in the restaking system with EigenLayer and Symbiotic and Milky Way and other kind of restaking platforms that are coming out there, you have these AVSs, which are essentially just like actively validated services that, are looking for economic security and are going to pay a certain amount for that economic security, right? So it's putting the validator or the operator, whatever you want to call them, kind of at the center of that discussion in terms of like, what is the, compensation that should be had? There is slashing risks, there is opportunity costs, there is computational, like costs to participating in all of these different systems, time. And so I think it's very interesting to see how that is playing out. We haven't seen a lot of AVSs launch yet. So like a lot of those dynamics are still coming through. As you said, on the Berachain side, it's similar, right? It's putting the validators kind of at the center of what's going on, not just this kind of like, group of like tech-minded individuals who are participating in consensus and nerding out over block times and doing that kind of stuff. It's really putting them kind of more at the center of what's going on. So I think it is similar in that way. But it's almost even more powerful, right? Like, this is a DeFi, Berachain is going to be a DeFi-centric, user-centric platform. And so where these incentives and these BGT tokens are directed is crucially important, right? It's a little ironic. I think, EigenLayer has been such a focus for such a long time, but I would not be surprised if Berachain ends up kind of beating them to the punch and actually launching and having these kind of like the system go into place before EigenLayer does. EigenLayer seems to be kind of very slow moving, very measured, which is good. They're trying to build a multi-billion-dollar, platform and marketplace for this kind of stuff to happen. Berachain, we can talk about when we all think it's going to happen, but I would not be surprised if we start kind of seeing that kind of like connection and like, validators playing this active role on Berachain before that actually goes live on EigenLayer. I'm not sure what your guys' take is on
it. Well, to the original question, like as a validator, as a Cosmos validator, I'm super excited. I think we on the Cosmos side have seen so many like chain launches, everybody's excited about it. And then a month later, no one's talking about it. And then you're running a node and just sort of like voting on governance. You're never talking with anyone about like improving. That's all like the team chain, like the team is in like a dark, smoky room somewhere, like making all the decisions. And then all of a sudden, like there's governance proposals online. So I think like the more you can get the validator community, the community, everyone involved as much as possible in making like small incremental decisions to like make sure all the yield is going to the right place, then like the better product you're going to have, because it's going to be driven by thousands of opinions and not 6 opinions, that may or may not change because the founder has a specific vision. So I think like the quicker it can move, the quicker like a protocol is able to like adapt and to like user needs, to like current market conditions, like the better it's going to be. So yeah, I like the design. Like I said, like I'm all about all new experiments, all new exciting things. And what was the other thing you asked, Mara? Like speculating on when we think it will launch?
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of been so hyped for so long. When do you think that's going to happen?
My guess is still like Q3, like maybe like right before like Q4. So like I don't know. I would say like the end of August to the end of October would be like my guess.
Right in time for Cosmoverse.
Yeah.
Berapalooza launch party in Dubai.
That would be amazing. Can you give us
Yeah.
any alpha, Yuri? Is there going to be any Berachain stuff going on at Cosmoverse?
Yeah, we will see. We will see. I mean, that's like one thing we discussed. Berachain won't have IBC, and everything that's like kind of Cosmos related is a little bit meh for the team or for the project or what else. But yeah, I think we will see like a very, and I also agree with them in many points that yeah, I also don't like this Cosmos branding that much. Because at the end of the day, it's a technology stack that Berachain also actively develops further. So this proof of liquidity concept is something completely novel. And I think that leads us to the next point is, I mean, it becomes much more clear that Berachain is much more than just a meme, even though it it looks like it if you engage with the Berachain community for the very first time. You think like, okay, what the hell is going on here? So if you would need to draw like a time horizon, what happens next with Berachain? Faber, what do you think? Where's Berachain essentially going? Like, what's the vision here? Can you imagine how Berachain can be used by or will be used by people who are, for example, still outside of crypto? That we have like serious financial applications on Berachain. I mean, that's like the end game for every distribution plan in crypto.
Well, I think the easiest way to gain mass adoption is probably through SocialFi. You know, it's something like Ansem Z talks about online ad nauseum every day. And I think that's probably right. So I know there's like a couple SocialFi things like happening on Berachain now. And so I think those are the types of applications that could like gain mass adoption, like millions of users very quickly. I think it probably won't happen right away. I think like Mara was saying, it's going to be like a DeFi sort of like yield specific stuff that's been like being worked on in the background for a long time. And so I think that's what it launches with. I think the more successful it is, the more likely that other high quality dApps will want to come and build on Berachain. So if they have the economics worked out and the tech worked out, then I think it'll make it a lot easier for like mobile first sort of applications and SocialFi type applications to come and join the party quickly.
I think also, you know, a lot of thoughts on this, but first of all, I think that, you know, it's interesting that they're not trying to be like Solana level fast or cheap, right? Like this is going to be more similar to like AVAX or I don't know, Polygon or something like that in terms of like how much it costs to operate. It will be very cheap, but it will not be, you know, micro cents. It'll be like a cent to send a transaction, maybe. I don't know, I'm just making that up, but like that kind of level order magnitude type thing. So I think that's an interesting design choice that they're making. And like, you know, yes, I absolutely think that the DeFi will kind of lead the way in the beginning, you know, from the DeFi Dojo over here. It's what we spend all of our time thinking about. So of course I'm biased towards that, but I do think it's also very conducive, you know, with Polaris to have a lot of other stuff going on. I think that they're going to have a really kind of great, you know, NFT culture going on. I think, as you said, SocialFi will be happening over there. There's going to be games that are launching over there. There's going to be a lot of stuff. And the proof of liquidity system is going to be able to support all of that, right? It's going to be able to support the growth of these other projects. And I wouldn't be surprised if we see, you know, kind of similar to the way Pudgy Penguins has kind of taken that step and gone mainstream, where you see kids with Pudgy Penguin dolls and shirts and I don't know, whatever that stuff is. I wouldn't be surprised if we see similar things kind of like happening like that as well with Berachain. I think it may be kind of the complete package where you have the DeFi, you have the SocialFi, you have the culture, you have the mainstream adoption. It's a fast, cheap chain. You know, I think it has a lot of stuff going on to do that. And I think, you know, a lot of it's riding on this proof of liquidity. But I think they've spent a really kind of long time thinking about it, considering, you know, the gamification that they're building into the system. And I think it really will be a net positive, of course, for DeFi, but also more broadly as well. And then also, they're going to have a really kind of interesting dynamic where there's a lot of new projects that are launching. So for example, there's some really interesting options protocols that I'm looking forward to kind of getting into that are launching there. But then they also have kind of like other DeFi protocols, like ones that are more established on ETH mainnet and other ecosystems that will be coming over as well. So I think, some of that tried and true with a lot of new, I think that kind of really brings an interesting dynamic to how the ecosystem will likely grow and also hold liquidity, because there is this constant flow of incentive that's coming out, rather than like on a place like Optimism or Arbitrum, where you have these periods of incentive, these periods of growth, rather than kind of this like ongoing thing that Berachain will have, with the emissions that are directed by the validator set and by users who are providing liquidity into the system.
Small hot take maybe, because what I found also very, very interesting is like a lot of my Ethereum friends have been very, very excited about Berachain from the very, very beginning. I mean, what I like if you would be like Ethereum, like I'm a big ETH bull, don't get me wrong, but so far all of the L2s and the rollups haven't gotten that much traction. And if we now talk about an ecosystem where you have 100 different dApps and like a lot of liquidity, and like, would you also say that this might be also like kind of, if this works out as it intends to, could this also be like a threat for all kinds of DeFi ecosystems that we know today? Because if there is liquidity to be made, and Mara, we were on a call yesterday, and you said one very important thing: liquidity is the most important, is the most expensive thing in crypto. So if there's like an ecosystem where you can easily get liquidity, how do you respond to this kind of like concern? Or like that Berachain could be like a serious competitor to all of the, I would still categorize Berachain as a general purpose layer one. That this could be like a killer for many, many established layer ones that we know today. Maybe not Ethereum, but lots of different others.
Yeah, I think it could be. I mean, they are very conscious in saying publicly that they're not trying to be an Ethereum killer. They're trying to be part of the ecosystem. I think we will see probably projects that are using the Berachain tech stack and also using like, Ethereum related stuff like EigenLayer DA, for example, or, like other related stuff. So they're not going after Ethereum, but I do think that they could put down a lot of other projects that are in a similar space. I'm thinking of stuff like AVAX. I'm thinking of stuff like Polygon. I'm thinking of stuff like Solana, like Aptos or Sui. I think that we have too many of these things, and they're too similar to one another. They're all just layer ones, very similar. Maybe there's some slight adjustment, faster block times, cheaper transactions. I don't know, something like that. And I think there's too much of it. And I think that Berachain is actually changing up the game and actually kind of, as you're saying, adding in this gamification, adding into this like long-term incentive plan that I think has a really good chance of working. And I think we might see, them killing some of these other kind of competitors that went out there and tried to be the Ethereum, killer by just being the same but cheaper, being the same but faster. And then this is a more thoughtful version of that, which has a lot of those kind of same elements of the quote unquote Ethereum killers, but is still paying respect to the king. And kind of, we might see a situation where other kind of like layer one blockchains can't compete with this kind of more well thought out, more kind of like community based approach to that. Because at the end of the day, like that's really what matters, right? Like if they can develop a system that has this like interesting gamification on proof of liquidity, has a really kind of like, active builder set of people who are creating and building new projects, attracting new projects, right? Like that's obvious, like oftentimes a big challenge, right? Like we talk to protocols all the time who are launching and received a grant. That grant only covers 1, 2, maybe 3 months of like dev time. And then they're stuck. They don't know what to do, right? So I think with Berachain, it will likely be different because there is this income source, there's this cash flow that will be starting from day one and going on continuously. I think they will attract a lot of kind of like the newest and best builders and keep them there, which has always been kind of like an issue for the general purpose blockchains, layer ones that we've seen from last cycle and that are launching this cycle as well.
Yeah, that's a very, very interesting way to look at it. Farmer, sorry, you want to say something?
Yeah, I think I would look at it kind of differently. I think almost every like decently high quality blockchain project gets like at least one bull market. I think I think like and I think unfortunately like some founders and people working at teams and stuff think about it that way as well, where they're like, okay, one bull market, Bitcoin's going to go up 4x and my shitty project's going to go up 12x and that'll be it. We made our money and then we move on to new projects. So I think that's sort of speaking to like the bullishness of Berachain, like Mara's talking about, is there's sort of like really thoughtfully trying to make this like a long-term quality project that has a lot of longevity. And I'm not sure how many other projects get like eaten by that along the way. I don't think that like Berachain is going to be like eating liquidity from other projects. I just think it has a much longer likelihood of being successful for like multiple bear and bull cycles. Whereas there are a lot of projects who are not offering much. And so they may only have like one bull run in them and then sort of like fizzle out and die and move on. So that's probably how, like, I think it's a different way of looking at it, but that's how I look at it. I think I don't think Berachain's certainly not like competing with like Ethereum and Solana or AVAX at this point, or like, those are all projects that are about to have like ETFs in the United States and have, be sort of like coming into their like full roadmap during what I think is going to be like a very bullish next couple years. And so I think like in bullish conditions, there's going to be a lot to go around. There's going to be a lot of new users. There's going to be a lot of liquidity injection from both like VCs and institutions, as well as like new retail players who are actually getting on and clicking the buttons. So I think it's a really long time horizon before we could figure out whether Berachain is actually like eating or killing some of these projects. I just think, you can't fork culture. It just like, for whatever reason, they nailed it and they ran with it and now they're executing on it. And so it's just a super, super bullish thing. I'm just not sure how much it takes from other projects. So hopefully as like a really robust DeFi ecosystem, they will just be like using their proof of liquidity to find interesting ways to incentivize others to bring their coins to Berachain. So like hopefully there's a lot of like Bitcoin and Ethereum TVL on Berachain moving forward. And so maybe Ethereum is coming to Berachain from Union, and Bitcoin is coming to Berachain through Babylon, and that through Polaris, there's like a lot of interesting things that can be built on top using those things. And I think they'll also want like AVAX and Solana coins and all of that sort of stuff to be integrated, so it can be sort of like more of a hub, more of a DeFi hub, and be interesting to as many possible users as they can interact with. So I don't really see it killing anything as of right now, but I think that's an interesting conversation for a couple years from now, or maybe in bearish conditions moving forward.
Yeah, I think this is where really projects prevail. How many bear markets did Ethereum survive and came back even stronger? Same thing with Solana, by the way. This is where they really, really earned my very personal respect, to basically come back that strong. They were really at the bottom of everything and they came back so strong. So 100% agree on that. I mean, there's like one last thing, but I think we can cover that fairly quickly, because that's like, I think, not the most important thing about Berachain, but there's obviously going to be an airdrop. People have been, did interact with the testnet already since February or something. There are lots of tutorials out there, but I think that's like super speculative how rewarding that airdrop will be. So let's see. I mean, lots of different people. You mentioned it, Farmer. So many people participated in 1 million users. So yeah, let's see how this this plays out as well.
I think, we'll see. I'm pretty optimistic on this airdrop. I think, like, for folks who are out there who want to get into the ecosystem early, go try out the testnet, get used to it, interact, right? Like, see how it works. That'll make you a better user on day one. right? That'll make you more informed in what's going on day one. So just for that alone and getting that edge, I think it's important.
And the gamification in February was just hilarious. I played around with it a lot. I have to admit, it was pretty cool. So
Yeah,
the
it's
UX,
cool. It's fun. There's like
it's fun,
more interesting stuff to do on it than there is on other testnets. Secondarily, you will probably get a pretty juicy airdrop. I mean, yes, there's a lot of users. Yes, there's a lot of people who are interacting, but it's going to be a big pie, right? We don't know the details of it. We don't know when exactly the airdrop is going to happen. We don't know how much the airdrop is going to be, but we do know it's a proof of stake system, and we do know that the token has to start day one. This is not going to be points, folks. Points are not going to be a part of the Berachain ecosystem. They're going to be dropping, tokens, and then that will then be for people to participate in the ecosystem. So, on one hand, I think there's a lot of people involved. On the other hand, getting that experience, having a little fun along the way, and then having the ability to participate day one, through kind of like this proof of stake system, I think is super important, and I think it's super interesting. And if you do end up getting the airdrop, I would highly encourage you, to delegate to the upcoming DeFi Dojo X Friends Validator. We will be on the ground day one. We're already out there talking to people. We're already out there kind of doing the groundwork. And, I think that we will be delegating and kind of directing emissions to the most, interesting people out there. And I mean interesting in the sense of people that will be bringing a lot back to the people that are delegating to us in terms of like competitive and interesting rewards. And then two, with the longer view of growing the ecosystem and kind of really making sure that this proof of liquidity system has sustainability and is being directed in the right ways that will kind of like strengthen what's going on and not just be frivolous kind of like emissions that are going on as well. So I'm super excited about it. There's a ton of, tutorials out there on how to participate. So definitely go and take a look at those. But yeah, I mean, I'm thinking, now that they've launched this kind of like part 2 of the testnet, I think we're getting closer, right? I think that like the time kind of is now. With the first testnet, felt like we were a long way off, maybe like a quarter, 2 quarters away. I'm kind of on the same page as Danny here, where I think we might see Berachain going live, maybe in August. Maybe, I definitely within this kind of like next period of like, I would say 2 to 3 months is where my head is on like when it will happen. Who knows, right? It depends on the markets. It depends on how the kind of like testnet is functioning and stuff. But I don't think that this is the kind of thing where you should be waiting. I think this is the time to be taking action so you can have kind of exposure to it in the relative near term.
Yeah, I think that's a very lovely way to wrap it up here. Go check it out, interact with the testnet. And yeah, if you get the airdrop, stake with DeFi Dojo, X-Friends Validator. With that being said, Mara, Danny, thank you so much for joining. I think this provides people a very comprehensive overview of what is up to come in the Berachain ecosystem. Eventually, we created some slight FOMO here to some of the listeners and viewers. So yeah, if you enjoyed this show, please go ahead and subscribe to the show. And again, remember to always stake with your DeFi Dojo X friends. With that being said, thank you, Mara. Thank you, Danny. And I hope I see you on the show very soon.